The Death Trap by Wes Penner. What usually happens when we die is that spirit guides, who are more often than not AIF in disguise, escort us to where in the astral we are supposed to go. Where we end up depends on our beliefs. If we believe in Jesus and heaven, we are most likely to be transported into such a frequency band, dimension in the astral plane. We will mingle with like-minded, and there might even be a God there, and Jesus might sit by his side. It's all virtual realities within virtual realities, and we help creating these realities with our beliefs, which form the energy we transmit and receive. Therefore, someone who believes in Krishna will likely end up in a dimension within the hologram containing a Hindu belief system. The afterlife often begins with a tunnel of light, through which the discarnate soul mind-like body travels to her destination. At the end of the tunnel, an appropriate being greets the soul. This being could be Jesus or Krishna, or simply a loved one who has passed away earlier. These beings' persons are often just projections, created by the AIF to pull the soul into a certain container or astral dimension. The AIF knows whom to project, because they have the technology to scan the soul before or at the death moment, for memories and experiences. These memories and experiences are then used to give the soul a life review, where she will re-experience the most recent lifetime in a matter of seconds or minutes measured in Earth time. The soul is then encouraged to examine this life experience and compare the good and not so good things she did during her previous lifetime. Subsequently, she discusses with her spirit guide what she needs to improve, and the soul will then feel a certain amount of guilt for the bad things she did to herself or others, or what she neglected to do for other people while she was incarnated. The spirit guide then suggests that the soul returns to Earth to remedy these flaws. In order to create balance, the spirit guide will tell the soul that in the next incarnation it is a good idea to experience the other side of the coin. If the soul was abusive to others in the previous life, it's a good idea to become the abused in the next lifetime to experience the matter from the other person's perspective. This is where the idea of karma comes into play. It is a term and a phenomenon invented by the AIF with the purpose of having the soul reincarnate willingly under a strict set of rules. It should also be mentioned that in some instances, a discarnate soul is recycled immediately after the recent body has expired. This soul goes through a tunnel as well, but in these cases, the tunnel just leads back to Earth again, and the soul is shot into a new body. She has no choice in the matter. The adventures in the afterlife trap are fairly well described by author and researcher Dr. Michael Newton, who wrote a series of books on the subject, after having put more than 7,000 subjects into regression therapy, where the subjects were telling similar stories of what happens between lives. His best book, in my opinion, is Destiny of Souls, regardless if she is vibrating on a frequency that is equivalent to the Christian heaven and Islamic heaven and hell or elsewhere. This between lives zone is just a temporary abode. The soul will eventually be brought into a control room in the astral, and with assistance from advanced technology, the soul will be beamed back to the earth plane, and will hover around the pregnant woman who is to become his or her mother. And at a point during the pregnancy, the soul enters the body, upon which a new lifetime begins. This describes the death trap in a nutshell. This soul recycling process has been practiced here for millennia, and each time we enter a new body, we do this with artificially induced amnesia caused by the AIF. Thus, we more or less have to relearn what we learned in previous lives. And even though we are not allowed to remember our past lives, traumas, and experiences from other lifetimes, and other lines of time affect us in the current incarnation because they are embedded in our soul. As a result, we often don't understand why we act and react the way we do, and why we are afraid of certain things and not of others. This makes life on Earth extremely difficult, and the so-called learning lessons are often filled with trauma, guilt, anger, sadness, and other unwanted experiences. This is not how it is supposed to be. It must also be mentioned that our wide range of emotions are also a part of the human experiment in 3D, and thus part of the physical universe experience and our human consciousness. The spirit over soul, and the soul when consciously living in the KHAA, does not have the same range of emotions we experience on Earth. This range of emotion was created by the AIF in order to better control us. They use these emotions against us. When we really think about it, what have these strong emotions done to humanity? It has more often than not led to pain and suffering and even more separation. It has led to conflict, jealousy, power struggles, and much, much more. Yes, we also have the ability to love another person, another part of ourselves, and we can have physical sex. These are the pleasurable parts of having strong emotions, but the love we feel for each other is still to a large degree selfish love we give. But we also need, in the KHAA, there is love as well, although it's on an entirely different level. It's unconditional in a sense, but it doesn't mean that beings can attack each other and let unconditional love restrain them from acting upon the assault. Things are handled accordingly, but as a rule, as peacefully as possible. Sometimes this is not the option of choice, and a conflict or even a war could emerge. The unconditional love, as we see it, is on the goddess and the spirit levels, where the divine feminine has unconditional love for all her creations. After all, she said, go out and create whatever you want, but you are responsible for what you create. The AIF tell us in the astral, if asked, that we need to have amnesia because time on Earth is linear, which is a construct, and it would be too overwhelming to remember everything. This is nonsense. If we remembered, we could at least have the option to do something about our problems, but those who control this system don't want us to be too clever. They keep us here so we can be their slaves and their workforce, not their equals or their superiors. The way it is set up, we don't even know the source of our problems because they often originated in other lifetimes. On the other hand, this 3D experience, instigated by Anki and his cohorts in the AIF, is a trap to begin with, so this previous discussion is basically obsolete. We need a way to break out of the prison, and fortunately there is a way. It might be difficult to wrap our heads around the fact that everything made of atoms is part of the trap. The easiest way to comprehend this, perhaps, is to compare the atomic universe, the physical universe, with our thoughts. Are our thoughts made of atoms? No. If we create with our thoughts, inside our head, are these thoughts made of atoms? No. Thus, if we exist in a void, which is void of atoms, and we create with our thoughts and manifest these thoughts directly into the void, are our manifestations made of atoms? No. However, you can also create delusions the way Anki did. You do so by manipulating spirits in your environment. When Lucifer Anki did this, it had not been done in such a manner before. Apparently, he created bodies of much lower frequencies and implanted a virtual reality into them. Then he seduced spirits to go in there and experience it, similar to how they seduce us to go into the smartphone world today. So beware. Once in that virtual reality, he closed the trap and made us believe that our physical bodies are very important and that they are separate from the spirit soul mind. This is how he created separation. Embedded into the physical body was also an astral body that the spirit was manipulated into using when the body expires. Thus, he had control over the spirit fragments even in the afterlife. This astral body, that is not you, feels a loss from the separation of the body, and even though she experiences a more exhilarated state of being in the astral, she thinks she needs to get back to get a new physical body to become whole again, and to live out her karma, something that is also a part of the manipulation. Also, the soul feels the urge to return to Earth because Earth was the planet where she originally was assigned her mission. She doesn't remember that this assignment was in the KHA and not in the physical universe. To be able to create the illusion of the astral dimensions, the dimensions of the physical universe, Anki created the physical universe with all its dimensions from the smallest and up. Meaning he created a mini-universe of atoms that built a bigger universe of planet, stars, and galaxies, etc. It was all copycatted from the basic spiritual universe. On-keys atoms become the cornerstones of the physical universe, and advanced technology is holding these atoms in place by keeping them within a certain limited frequency band and vibrations, thus the limitations we experience. The atoms in our bodies vibrate within this limited frequency as well, and so we are trapped, or we are led to think we are. Saturn is a key to keeping the hologram in place in our solar system. Saturn transmits certain sound frequencies that can be heard in NASA videos. It sounds very distorted and dissonant, and it is. We can only hear these sound frequencies within the band of human perception when they are slowed down, i.e. within the frequency band of the trap. Indeed, the frequencies that Saturn and other planets to transmit are the frequencies that help keeping the hologram intact. A portal to the home universe. I am fully aware that this is the first time any of us intends to break out of the 8th prison, and I am aware that it is scary for most people. I would say for all people, although perhaps more so for some than for others. Everything that deals with the unknown is frightening to some degree. The same fear hits most of us when we try to induce an out-of-body experience, so there is a fear of death. This fear is embedded in our 3D bodies, and therefore, we all have it to a certain extent. Also, much of what I am writing about in general can seem scary to many to begin with, but once that fear is overcome, inner calmness and peace replace the fear, and we move to a higher state of consciousness, closer to our real self. The fear mechanisms that are implanted in our bodies by the 8th scientists are becoming more and more deactivated, and the DNA that is dormant inside us begin to light up, one strand at a time. Although DNA is also a construct in the physical universe, it still is connected to our consciousness. It's often difficult for researchers to share what they have discovered if the information is negative because they are afraid that people will consider them to be fear-mongers in the past. I used to think that way, too, until I took another look at myself and saw what I had gained from taking part of the so-called negative information, and the gains were quite substantial. If I could gain from it, others can too, I thought. We all just need to go through various stages of emotions, including anger, before we reach the other side and stop being reactive to things and replace our reactivity with inner peace, something that happens automatically over time. We urgently need to know both the negative and the positive sides of things, or we'll only know half of the story. We also live in a constructive polarity, so we can't exclude one polarity in favor of another. When it comes to exiting the death trap, we don't need to be afraid. After all, we have died thousands of times already, so that's nothing new. The only thing that's new is that this time we want to try something outside the norm. This time, we have an opportunity we've never had before because the grid that surrounds our planet is no longer intact. Primarily because there are some of us humans who have raised our consciousness to a level where we partly vibrate outside the limited frequency band we call the 3rd dimension. Thus, there are now holes in the grid that act like portals, leading straight out of the frequency prison. The grid now looks more like Swiss cheese than an intact electromagnetic field. As much as things appear to be more dire now than perhaps ever before on our planet, the opposite polarity is also true. We have a small window where we can finally exit. When relatives and friends die, we usually miss them and perhaps grieve them. We feel a loss, and we wish we could see them and be with them again. The overlords are well aware of this, and they have played on our emotions since they manipulated Homo sapiens into being in the first place long ago. By scanning us at our death moment, the afterlife staff, the so-called Greys, who will sometimes be in disguise and sometimes not, will know who your loved ones are. In order to solidify the trap, the deceased may see a projection of a loved one who comes to greet her. This is usually enough in order to seduce the soul into entering the appropriate astral dimension. On occasion, if the loved one is still on the other side, this soul may actually be the one greeting the recently discarnate. However, for the diseased, It's almost impossible to tell the difference between a holographic projection and the real souls of the relatives and loved ones. As I've mentioned many times before, it's impossible for humans to imagine how advanced AVE technology is compared to Earth technology in our time. The spirit guide could also take the form of a loved one, an old friend from the recent lifetime, or from a lifetime previous to that. Sometimes, there are more than one spirit guide, so I won't take up space here to repeat that information, especially because this article is discussing how to avoid the trap, not the details of the trap. The recycling trap and the exit point. By Zhang Ailag, the first important thing is to ignore whomever approaches you once you separate from your physical body.